Hero here for Umbra Games with a review of Final Fantasy 15, played on PlayStation 4, but also currently available on Xbox One. Fans like myself have waited nearly 10 years, first hearing of a new game that barely resembled this final product, being developed for PlayStation 3, called Final Fantasy 13 Versus, part of the Final Fantasy 13 cluster of games known as the Fabula Nova Crystallis, which was revealed to the public in 2006. It wasn't until 2013 that Square Enix let us know that 13 Versus was cancelled, and become what we had today for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, released on November 29th, 2016. Sure, we've seen the other two core games of the Final Fantasy 13 series be released, and somewhat disappointingly so, and the rise and fall and rebirth of Final Fantasy 14 Online. But it started to feel a long time since we've had a quality core series release. Final Fantasy 15 follows the exploits of Prince Noctis and his three friends and bodyguards, Prompto, Gladio, and Ignis. They take the Regalia, a fancy convertible automobile, and attempt to head to the island continent of Accordo to meet up with Noctis' betrothed Lunafreya, and then a lot of bad stuff happens. Now, let me suggest that before you play the game, watch the movie Final Fantasy Kingsglaive, released a couple months before the game, and even included with some special editions of 15. While the movie met pretty harsh reviews from critics, there's a lot of eye candy to take from the battle scenes, some quality voice acting from the likes of Sean Bean, Aaron Paul, and Lena Headey, but more importantly is the emotional weight lent to the game through the story of King Regis and the battle for the crown city of Insomnia. While you can pick up everything you need plot-wise from the game itself, its first of 15 chapters run concurrently with the film. Anyway, it would hardly be Final Fantasy without an evil empire, even more so having said empire be hungry for crystal collection and the power that it grants. Final Fantasy 15 is no divergence from that path. I will admit this is the first time in a long time that Square Enix has made characters that I can actually care about. Some tragic things happen in this game, and I'll admit, I got choked up on a couple of them. While at first glance these guys look like some kind of emo boy band, their personalities really begin to shine through. And even Prompto, who is obsessed with social media and taking pictures, ended up being a fairly deep character, discovered through a couple of optional cutscenes. While he snapping pictures constantly at first seemed like a gimmick, looking at all the in-game battle shots with various filters as we'd set up camp ended up being pretty entertaining. While they do play the stereotypes a little strong in NPCs at times, overall the characters added depth to the narrative. The lip movements don't really seem to sync very well with what the characters are saying, but when you're dubbing in multiple languages, you can only expect so much. Now, since 11, Final Fantasy core games have sort of taken a slightly more action-oriented approach to combat, using what I'd call real-time combat. You're not pressing the button to make your character swing the weapon, but you tell your character to target and attack a hostile while navigating around the battlefield. 15 goes along those lines, allowing you to hold the circle button to have Noctis do attack combos for as long as it's held. Noctis can equip up to 4 weapons at a time that can be switched between, even mid-combo, by pressing a direction on the control pad. Magic does come into play, but it is a finite item that can be condensed into flasks and thrown on the battlefield, equipped the same way as weapons. Prompto, Ignis, and Gladio are controlled completely through AI, with the exception of techniques you can command by holding the L1 button to issue. Each character can have one technique equipped at a time, and once activated will engage a cinematic takedown with a well-timed circle press from Noctis adding additional damage. Each party member has specific weapon types they can use from the party stash. You'll find a surprisingly limited number of arms in the shops, but you can also find others that can be upgraded by applying specific drops. The only other pieces of equipment are the traditional accessories that increase various stats or provide status resistances. Enemies have weaknesses and resistances, per usual, signified by the numbering color, orange for weak, purple for resistance, and white for neither. Noctis gets bonus damage for positioning himself behind enemies to trigger a blindside attack, and if another party member is near, a blindside link can occur where the two will do bonus damage together. Now, there is a wait mode if you want to approach things a little more strategically, but made it all the way through the game on normal difficulty without dying and without using the wait mode. The closest comparison I can come to is Dragon Age Inquisition. I found the combat to be fairly reminiscent of that, just a little bit more aggressive. The key to that aggression, and what really makes 15 stand out, is the presence of Noctis' Warp Strike, and what a difference that makes. Using the triangle button, Noctis can warp in and out of battle to attack and back to safety at the cost of some MP, which refills while he's withdrawn from battle. The further the warp, the greater the damage multiplier. Holding the square button is the only other use of MP, which phases Noctis out, avoiding most forms of damage and looking pretty cool in the meantime. There's also time blocks with parries for more damage. The traditional Final Fantasy summoning is present, but doesn't play quite as much of a part in this one, randomly showing you to hit L2, and you must not take damage for 5 seconds for whatever deity was triggered by your environmental conditions. They are extremely impressive and powerful, but very random. So most of the time, combat looks really great. It does look pretty chaotic to onlookers, but when you're in the heat of it personally, you can feel the groove. It does get a bit chaotic at times when you're level 17 and fighting 10 level 12 super speedy mobs all of a sudden, when you try to lock onto something that dashes around constantly, or some of the giant creatures where you can't even see yourself while locked. But those problems are few and far between. There are a few quick-time event battle scenes, but most of the time they stick to logical button presses and are far more impressive than they are irritating. There are 2 types of character progression in Final Fantasy 15. As you kill enemies and complete main and side quests, you gain experience points. These points will accumulate until you camp or rest in various accommodations. Experience is then tallied and your characters gain levels accordingly, increasing their base stats. The nicer the accommodations in which you rest, the higher your experience multiplier, which led me to save up as much as possible and pay some money to get a 1.5 times multiplier more often than just camping in the wilderness. The downside to that is Ignis, the culinarian of the group, will only cook recipes and build up his skill when the team is roughing it, leaving you to grind it out later if you want it maxed. The second type of progression is AP. These ability points can be awarded for many things, and are used to purchase nodes on the various skill trees. These trees include stat bonuses, new techniques, faster healing, more powerful magic, as well as opening more ways to earn AP, such as riding chocobos, fishing, or taking rides in the car. You most likely won't reach everything in the tree, especially because some of the higher skills cost about 900 points or so. All characters share the same AP pool, and some abilities only apply to one party member. There were very few things I personally was saving for, and often bought just as many cheap things as I could to build the efficiency all over, and the PlayStation trophy for this is only for opening 50 nodes, period. Final Fantasy 15 is coincidentally divided into 15 story chapters, with a somewhat different approach in level design. In the first chapter, via plot mechanics, the boys are all stuck in one section of a decent-sized map, where they can roam about gathering side quests and perform bounty hunts alongside the main questline. After some events pass, even more of the vast continent becomes available, until Chapter 9, where this linearity kicks in. Now, you eventually gain the ability to travel back to the open world areas, but story progression continues in these linear areas until completion of the game in Chapter 14. Chapter 15 is for post-game content. And, it is what it is, but I'll be honest, it's hard to think there isn't some element of this that was driven by the game being in development for so long. Someone made a really big fortress that was probably supposed to be for the end of the game, and things didn't match up how they planned, but they didn't want to waste the assets. So they steered it into being a noctis, solo, awkward stealth chapter that just goes on unreasonably long. Now, the fans push back so hard on Final Fantasy 13 for being so linear, but maybe Square Enix just hasn't quite nailed how to deliver a truly moving story in a vast open world, and need the linearity to tell the story they want to in this modern age. So they give an open world with random, unrelated MMO-type side quests and non-plot-driven hunts to appease you. So I've seen a few open world games in my day, and I will say size isn't everything. I remember Red Dead Redemption coming out on Xbox 360, boasting 5 times the square miles of GTA San Andreas in the previous generation, or something of the like. But so much of Red Dead was empty. It was just unused space that only served to increase travel time between objectives. Bethesda's Skyrim, on the other hand, made every journey between landmarks fairly enriched, never knowing what you're going to stumble into, a scripted event, a monument to find, or a cave in which to delve. Now, at first look, Final Fantasy XV's world felt kind of empty, but if you engage in the side content as you progress, you'll find yourself reaching nearly every corner, and there are a few surprises in store. On top of that, though, the world is beautiful. The scale Square Enix achieved is breathtaking at times. There's this fallen meteor in the center of one of the continents that can be viewed from nearly all parts of the island, and when you finally venture into the crater, its massive presence just feels so dwarfing. Behemoths truly are behemoth. The gods you traditionally summon scoop you up in the palm of their hand. And that's not even mentioning the alleged 72-hour battle with the game's optional mountain-sized boss. Now, some textures do look a touch dated. I mean, they were being developed 10 years ago. Overall, the environment fits well together, though, and I found myself stopping just to take it in more than once. Noctis' party character models are also well detailed, and that shows the most with the way hair and clothing material move. A lot of work went into the creature design too, from the stringy muscles and the behemoth to the shining of the bombs. There are dungeons marked by red icons on the map, and honestly, if it weren't for the icons and the minimap change, you may not even know you're entering one due to the seamless transition. Now, the dungeon complexity leaves something to be desired though, as most are simply long winding hallways or valleys. One thing that does shine in these areas though is the dynamic dialogue system of the party. I'd like to see a number on how many lines of dialogue were actually recorded for this, and while some of the battle winning and fishing statements get a little overused, the way characters react to noises and changes in the environment is pretty impressive. Aside from the super long aforementioned out-of-place solo stealth mission of Noctis's, there are a couple other infiltration missions that require stealth and warp strikes that just kind of felt tacked on and subtracted a bit from my experience. There are two types of side quests in Final Fantasy XV, including the traditional question mark NPC displayed on the map asking you to kill something or deliver something, and there are also hunts you can perform to increase your rank. Side quests give decent experience, while hunts are there primarily for the gil reward. While not called out as a side quest, Noctis also seeks the weapon of his ancestors, 13 in all, some of which are received from story points, the others are hidden in the game's optional dungeons. One inherent flaw of a truly open world, though, is the awkward level scaling. As you break out into the full world, you may spend time in the first couple stops completing every quest you can find within reach. So by the time you reach, say, the 15th stop, you're getting quests 1/4 of your level, and any vision of a challenge has vanished. Now you can skip the side content to stay on an equal level with the main quest to keep it challenging. If you ever plan on going back to side content, it's a monotonous fast travel, assassinate, fast travel, turn-in parade. Which actually brings me to the fast travel. Throughout the game, you continue to have access to Noctis's wheels. You can choose to drive it manually or set an auto point and have Ignis drive for you. The first couple of chapters have some really odd rules of this transportation, with Ignis not wanting to drive at night because of the demons that randomly appear on the road, and a super long cutscene if you decide to press on without him. The menu to fast travel is a bit heavy-handed because most of the time you're looking at a map to see where it is you want to go, but then instead of being able to click, you have to go and choose it from a list of one of the parking spots you've been to, or quest locations, or you have to choose the map point and then find and select that point on the map again. The problem with quest fast travel is there may be a parking spot really close to it that you can pay 10 gil and skip the drive as opposed to the 5 or 6 minute cruising with your friends, but in that case you have to find the stop closest to the quest and choose that from the menu. Speaking of that 10 gil though, I find that as a mystifying design choice as well. 10 gil is such a minor cost, as in meals can be purchased in the thousands of gil, that it almost seems pointless. The Regalia also has a fuel level that costs 10 gil to fill up. I mean, that cost is so low, it's just a curiosity why it's even there. Now, much like the MMOs, you can get a chocobo mount that you and your party can summon whenever you're in outside areas. Now, I remember the feeling of performing an unassuming quest in Final Fantasy 11 and 14 to get your chocobo mount, and they've kind of repeated that here in 15. I mean, if you're not doing side quests, there's a good chance you could miss the side quests that give you access to this much-needed feature. Same with that ability to drive at night. I mean, I personally enjoy that it's not formulaically labeled or part of the story personally, but if you're looking to stay even level with the main story for the challenge by skipping side quests, this could be a point of contention. There appears to be a bit of post-game content, some new hunts, a couple high-level optional dungeons, and the aforementioned high-level optional boss. One of the activities I was going to go for is obtaining all of the weapons from Noctis's lineage by finding those tombs. I had 11 of 13, and went for a deep dive into one of the dungeons where another one was supposed to be. After running around for about 2 hours figuring out where to go and fighting a ton of enemies, Noctis and Gladio got glitched through a wall, separated from the other two members that were locked into combat, so I couldn't use the escape to entrance option from the menu. So, frustrated, I wimped out and quit the path to platinum just 6 trophies away, making my total conquest about 43 hours. So, is this the Final Fantasy we've been waiting for? The giant, beautiful open world that's available through a little more than half the chapters? Tons of quest content that sometimes feels a little shallow that could have improved through more meaningful story chains? Tons of fast-paced combat style, although occasionally chaotic? Deeper characters than we've seen in a while, with a story that's not afraid to pull punches, skill trees that are definitely not grid sphere, seamless dungeons with mildly long load times only when you first start or fast travel. I would say 15 is definitely a move in the right direction, and rated as a real-time role-playing game, lands at an 84 out of 100, with 50 being an average game. This is Jiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. Continuing to cover AAA blockbusters to the smaller indie games, Subscribe to the channel for more reviews, or follow me on Twitter at Umbra Games.